Today we think of New Mexico and its surrounding environs as a charming, quaint stopover on the way west to the Grand Canyon, Las Vegas, and the West Coast. But the desert Southwest is also a land of secrets. Chapter 6. The invention of radar-guided missiles and contact with beings from another planet. A secret of the desert Southwest. Shortly after the end of World War II, events in this land of enchantment brought the attention of the entire United States with the report of an alien craft which crashed near Roswell, located in the central area of the state. Quickly, though, the story was changed to that of a weather balloon falling to Earth, and the initial reports of alien beings who survived the crash were quickly removed from newspaper and radio reports. Over the following decades, the rumors of the Roswell events of 1947 evolved into folklore. Decades later, fictional movies and television shows would document and dramatize the Roswell events, but the U.S. government continued to deny any alien contact. However, as television technology evolved to the ubiquitous proliferation of cameras and digital video recording by millions of individuals located all over the world who could track all activity all of the time, the story of the Roswell alien crash has become the world's worst-kept secret. But the proof has been in plain sight for decades. Only now that we have the internet can the entire story be told. The visitation of beings from other worlds in modern history has been documented in various but subtle ways, largely due to the general public understanding of the known science of their times. World War II advanced the knowledge of all technologies in order to create better weapons and defenses to counter same. The airplane, tanks, bombs, radio, rockets, and nuclear energy were all advanced rapidly as World War II continued to destroy much of the infrastructure of the existing developed nations of the world. These developments culminated in the successful creation of the atom bomb, developed in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and tested as what is now known as the White Sands Missile Range near Fort Bliss, Texas. The atom bomb hastened the end of World War II, but prompted the beginning of the arms race, and then evolved into the Cold War against Soviet Russia, which still continues in some limited form or fashion to this very day. The Nazis, facing diminishing resources and the overwhelming might of the advancing Russians and Americans, devoted much of their capital to the development of ballistic missiles. They nicknamed these remote-controlled, pilotless artillery delivery platforms vengeance weapons. When capture by the Russians was imminent, Dr. Wernher von Braun, inventor of the V-1 and V-2 systems, gathered up his plans and personnel and headed for the nearest American lines to surrender. The U.S. Army packed up all the remaining V-2 missiles, documentation, and Braun's engineers as a part of Operation Paperclip, a War Department program to capture Nazi scientists and their technology. In 1946, von Braun and company are sent to Fort Bliss, Texas. This former frontier post, situated between the border of Mexico on the south and New Mexico on the north and west, played a key role decades earlier in securing the West from marauding Indians and Mexican bandits for European settlers on the Mexican border. Post-World War II, Fort Bliss was, and still is, the operational control center for the Alamogordo Gunnery and Bombing Range, later named White Sands Missile Range. White Sands is located 45 miles to the north of El Paso, just across the New Mexico border. The name originated from an outcropping of gypsum sand plunked right in the middle of the desert, adjacent to where the former Alamogordo Gunnery Range was located. At this time, the Army Air Force had yet to be split into a service unto itself. Braun, his team, and the remaining V-2 rockets were transported to the 3,200 square mile range that stretched from just north of El Paso, east of Las Cruces, to just south of Socorro, New Mexico. Only 2 years previous, White Sands Missile Range was the site of the detonation of the first atomic weapon. Ballistic missile development became the new mission for White Sands Missile Range in 1946. Another invention accomplished by wartime British researchers John Randall and Harry Boot of the University of Birmingham in the UK developed the cavity magnetron, an ultra-high frequency tube that would focus a high-powered beam of electrons that, when bounced off the hull of a ship or airframe, could send a return signal. The time of the return, coupled with the azimuth and elevation of the beam, could locate an aircraft or ship. The obvious result of this technology was that enemy aircraft and ships could be spotted, tracked, and then targeted. This development, occurring when it did in 1940, gave the Allies an edge in the ensuing war. In return for assistance of armaments and ammunition, the United States government obtained licensing for the cavity magnetron technology. It was originally called radio range and detection. Later that was shortened to radar. This invention definitely shortened the war, as enemy aircraft attacks could be discovered well in advance, allowing ample time for countermeasures to meet the enemy and return fire. After the war, Fort Bliss would soon be named the U.S. Army Air Defense Center in 1946. From then on, U.S. and Allied soldiers would train to fire radar-guided missiles named after Greek gods Ajax, Nike, and Zeus to intercept Soviet nuclear missiles that were deployed by the thousands. Unbeknownst to the general public, Wernher von Braun would continue his rocketry program that would eventually lead to the development of the Saturn V rocket, the space vehicle that would carry American astronauts to the moon. Because of his previous membership in the Nazi Party, von Braun was still despised by many Americans who had lost family members in the war. The remote location of White Sands and strict security prevented the public from ever knowing that the ex-Nazis were building and testing ballistic missiles in the New Mexican desert. Beginning in mid-1946, 25 fully constructed V-2 rockets were delivered to White Sands, along with enough parts to construct 42 more. General Electric was contracted to assemble the remaining parts under the direction of Wernher von Braun and his team. Later that same year, testing of the missiles began with one launch of the V-2 rocket every 6 weeks. The rockets would be fired into the atmosphere with environmental measuring equipment with telemetry to send data back to ground control, to test winds aloft, speed, altitude, as well as take photos and film. When the missile fuel was expended, the V-2s would fall to Earth. The ground controllers would then detonate the rockets at 500 feet above the terrain to prevent impact with Earth. The telemetry modules would be recovered afterwards. These launches and detonations began in late 1946 and continued until 1952. In January of 1947, the first anti-aircraft battery from Fort Bliss was deployed to White Sands Proving Grounds. The official history of this unit has been erased from Wikipedia. Who were they, and why was their official history eliminated from the record? In 1945, the U.S. Army contracted with Bell Labs and Western Electric to build a ballistic missile that could be controlled by radar to repel jet aircraft that were now commonplace in developed nations' air forces. This first version of this device, named the Private, was a combination of a rocket outfitted with a bomb that could be controlled by a radar operated from the ground by a crew assisted by a computer. In this era, computers were quite large and extremely expensive, but capable of rapidly making mathematical calculations. The radar would track the azimuth, elevation, trajectory, and speed of an enemy aircraft, and the computer would calculate the flight path of the invader. Then, control signals would be sent to the defender's missile while in flight, directing the craft, which travels at supersonic speed, to intercept the enemy ship and explode when directly in front of the attacker. According to Wikipedia, a test series of private missile F-series launches were conducted at Waco Range, Fort Bliss, Texas, between April 1 and April 13th in 1945. Waco Tanks, an ancient Indian natural water reservoir, is located 40 miles east of Fort Bliss and 190 air miles south of Corona, New Mexico. Clearly, missiles controlled by radar were being tested in West Texas and southern New Mexico from 1945 onward. The Roswell incident was first reported when the wreckage of the unknown aircraft was discovered on July 7th by Mac Brazel on his ranch near the small town of Corona, New Mexico, 150 miles northeast of White Sands Missile Range. The speculation was that the incident took place in mid-June, perhaps 3 weeks before the discovery and subsequent reporting to Army authorities. Over the years, however, the true story has emerged, but the U.S. government has continued, up until recently, to maintain that no visitors from other worlds have been found or captured. The Freedom of Information Act opened the files of the FBI in 1974, and this 1950 memo from FBI Special Agent Guy Hottle relates an interview with an unnamed Air Force officer who reported that 3 saucer-like aircraft crashed in the Corona area. Whether it was radar and intercontinental ballistic missiles or V-2 rockets being detonated before impact that caused the crash, it is likely that visitors from another galaxy traveled to New Mexico to learn more about the atomic bombs being built there. Those are the facts. Just one more secret of the desert Southwest. A space traveler on a mission, in search of an asteroid, a much-needed power source for their planet, a dying Soviet satellite, a moment's distraction, the traveler is shipwrecked. The CR-69er patrols the Sat Belt Zone, protecting Earth. The Alpha Stone, rich in gold, silver, and semi-precious jewels. Blodar and Dr. Cloroth, space pirates, scavengers trolling for treasure. Amarulia, a planet rich with silver. Amarulians, makers of jewelry. The plot: steal the Alpha Stone, harness its power, rob the Amarulians. The crew of the CR-69er goes into action. Catch the adventures. Team Space One.